Chapter 1: Introduction and Departure from London. Hello and welcome to Loop the Loop English. Today, you're coming with me on a long journey, a trip around the world. It's not just a travel story. It's also an English listening practice for you. We will visit new countries, meet people, taste delicious food, and I'll explain useful English words and expressions along the way. So, relax, make yourself a cup of tea, and let's start. It was early morning in London. The sky was a pale grey, and a light rain was falling. I stood at the airport with my backpack. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh pastries from a cafe nearby. My passport was in my hand, my boarding pass in my pocket. I looked at the big electronic board. It showed hundreds of flights: New York, Tokyo, Paris, and mine, Istanbul, Turkey. Now, let me explain a word: boarding. Boarding means the process of getting on an airplane, bus, or ship. Example: boarding will begin at gate 12 in 10 minutes. The loudspeaker announced, Flight 198 to Istanbul is now boarding at gate C7. I smiled. This was it, the beginning of my journey. As I walked through the airport gate, I noticed people speaking many languages: English, Turkish, Arabic, French. Some people looked excited, some tired. A small boy was playing with a toy airplane, pretending it was flying through the air. On the plane, I found my seat, 23A, next to the window. I put my backpack in the overhead compartment and sat down. A woman with short black hair sat beside me. She smiled and said, "First time to Turkey?" I replied, "Yes, I've always wanted to see Istanbul." We chatted for a few minutes. She was from Ankara, the capital of Turkey, and she told me about Turkish tea and the famous markets. The plane took off, and London grew smaller and smaller below us. I pressed my forehead against the window and watched the clouds pass by. Vocabulary tip: forehead, the part of your face above your eyes. Clouds pass by, when clouds move past you while you are in motion. It was a 4-hour flight, and during that time, I read a travel guide about Istanbul. It showed pictures of mosques with tall minarets, the blue waters of the Bosphorus, and plates of delicious Turkish food: kebabs, baklava, fresh bread. By the time the plane landed, my excitement was at its peak. And this is how my journey began. But arriving in Istanbul was just the first step, and believe me, my adventure started the moment I stepped out of the airport. Chapter 2: Arrival in Istanbul and Grand Bazaar. When the plane doors opened, a wave of warm air entered the cabin. It was late afternoon, and the sun was still high in the sky. The smell of jet fuel mixed with the faint scent of the city outside, a mix of the sea, street food, and something I couldn't name yet. I collected my bag and went through passport control. The officer glanced at my passport, stamped it, and said, "Hoş geldiniz." That means welcome in Turkish. Outside the airport, the city felt alive. Yellow taxis honked, buses rumbled past, street vendors were selling simit, round bread covered in sesame seeds, from small carts. The smell was irresistible. I waved to a taxi and told the driver my hotel's name. He nodded and said, "Yes, yes. Sultanahmet." That was the historic part of the city. As we drove, I looked out of the window. Minarets reached into the sky. Shops spilled colorful scarves, lamps, and spices onto the streets. People walked quickly, some carrying shopping bags, others sipping tea from tulip-shaped glasses. At the hotel, the receptionist greeted me warmly. "Welcome. Here is your key. Your room is on the 3rd floor. Breakfast starts at 7. The room was simple but comfortable. From the window, I could see a narrow cobblestone street, and in the distance, the domes of the Blue Mosque. The next morning, I woke up early. The sound of seagulls and the call to prayer drifted through the open window. I went downstairs for breakfast: olives, cheese, bread, tomatoes, cucumbers, and strong black tea. It was different from my usual breakfast, but I liked it immediately. After eating, I set out for my first destination, the Grand Bazaar. This famous market was like a small city under one roof. The moment I entered, I was surrounded by colors: carpets in red, blue, and gold, lanterns glowing in orange light, jewelry that sparkled under the lamps. A shopkeeper called out to me, "Hello, my friend. Where are you from?" I smiled. "From England." "Ah, England. Welcome, welcome. Come, look at my carpets." Very good quality, best in Istanbul. He showed me a carpet with a pattern of flowers and stars. It felt soft under my hand. I didn't plan to buy anything, but I enjoyed listening to his stories about how each carpet was made. Vocabulary tip: shopkeeper, someone who owns or works in a shop. Pattern, a repeated decorative design. I wandered from shop to shop. In one, I saw brass teapots shining like gold. In another, shelves of colorful ceramics, plates, bowls, and cups with intricate designs. The smell of spices filled the air: cinnamon, cumin, saffron. Some shops sold sweets, lokum, known in English as Turkish delight, in flavors like rose, lemon, and pistachio. One seller offered me a piece of pistachio delight. It was sweet, soft, and a little chewy. Good? He asked. Very good, I replied. As I walked deeper into the bazaar, I noticed it was easy to lose my sense of direction. Every corridor looked similar, and each turn led to more shops. But instead of feeling worried, I felt curious. This was exactly why I had come: to explore, to get lost, and to discover new things. Phrase tip: get lost. In travel, it can mean losing your way, but also having an adventure by exploring without a clear plan. When I finally stepped outside into the bright daylight, I realized I had been inside for hours. The city felt even more alive now, with more people on the streets, more sounds, more smells. I decided my next stop would be the waterfront, to see the Bosphorus for the first time. But I didn't know yet that this trip to the water would not go as planned. Chapter 3: Getting Lost and Bosphorus Adventure. I left the Grand Bazaar and started walking downhill toward where I thought the Bosphorus would be. The sun was high, and the stone streets were warm under my shoes. Small shops lined the road: bakeries, tea houses, souvenir stalls. A man selling roasted chestnuts waved at me and held out a small paper bag. The smell was tempting, so I bought some. They were hot, and I had to peel off the shells carefully. As I walked, I passed by the sound of clinking tea glasses. In Turkey, tea is everywhere. People drink it at breakfast, during work, in the afternoon, even late at night. They don't drink it in big mugs like in England. Instead, they use small, tulip-shaped glasses. The tea is strong, dark red, and often served with 2 small sugar cubes. After about 20 minutes, I reached a large open square. There were buses, trams, and people everywhere. In the distance, I could see water glistening in the sun. That must be the Bosphorus, I thought. I followed the crowd toward the ferry terminal. Signs were in Turkish, but I recognized the word, Kadikoy. It sounded familiar from my travel book, and I remembered it was on the Asian side of Istanbul. Perfect, I thought, I can take a ferry across. Vocabulary tip: terminal, a place where buses, trains, or ships start or finish their journeys. Recognize, to know something because you have seen or heard it before. I bought a ticket and boarded the ferry. The seats inside were full, so I stood outside at the back, feeling the wind on my face as the boat started moving. Seagulls followed us, swooping down to catch pieces of bread thrown by passengers. The city skyline grew smaller, and I saw mosques, bridges, and tall buildings in the distance. I took out my phone to check the map, but the internet wasn't working. No problem, I thought I'll just figure it out when I arrive. When the ferry docked, I realized I wasn't in Kadikoy at all. The sign said Beykoz, a small fishing area far from the city center. I had taken the wrong boat. I laughed to myself. Well, this is what travel is about, I whispered. Sometimes you end up somewhere you never planned. Beykoz was quiet. Small fishing boats were tied to the pier. A few old men sat on wooden benches, sipping tea and watching the water. One man noticed me looking lost and smiled. I walked over and said slowly, "Hello. Do you speak English?" He shook his head. I pointed toward the city and said, "Eminonu," the name of the ferry stop near the Grand Bazaar. He understood and pointed to another ferry terminal down the street. Before I left, he held out a small cup of tea and gestured for me to drink. It was sweet, warm, and comforting. Phrase tip: gesture for someone to do something. Use hand or body movements to tell someone what to do without speaking. I walked to the terminal and waited for the next ferry. The ride back to the city was even more beautiful. The sun was starting to set, and the water turned gold and orange. When I arrived, the lights along the Bosphorus were coming on, one by one. I decided to sit at a cafe by the water. The waiter came over and asked, "Turkish coffee or tea?" I had never tried Turkish coffee, so I ordered one. It came in a small cup with thick, dark liquid inside. The first sip was strong and bitter, but the flavor was rich and unforgettable. I watched the ferries come and go, the city glowing behind them, and thought, this is only my first destination. How many more surprises are waiting for me? Chapter 4, Bangkok, First Impressions and Street Food. After a week in Istanbul, it was time for my next destination, Bangkok, Thailand. The flight took almost 10 hours. When the plane landed and the doors opened, a wave of hot, humid air rushed in. It felt like stepping into a sauna. I could smell something sweet and spicy drifting from the airport food stalls. At passport control, the officer looked at me, smiled, and said, "Welcome to Thailand." Outside the airport, Bangkok was buzzing with energy. Taxis in bright pink, yellow, and green zipped past. Motorbikes weaved between cars, and the sound of horns mixed with music from street stalls. Vendors were selling grilled chicken skewers, steaming bowls of noodle soup, and fresh tropical fruits, mangoes, pineapples, and papayas. I took a taxi to my hotel near the Chao Phraya River. The driver spoke only a little English, but he smiled often and pointed out interesting places as we drove. We passed golden temples, colorful billboards, and small markets where people bargained over vegetables. The hotel was simple but had a view of the river. From my balcony, I could see boats of all sizes moving across the water, some carrying tourists, others carrying goods. Vocabulary tip, weave between, to move in and out of things while going forward. Bargain over, to discuss the price of something before buying it. That evening, I decided to explore the night market. The moment I arrived, I was overwhelmed, in a good way. Everywhere I looked, there were lights, colors, and smells. Rows of stalls sold clothes, jewelry, souvenirs, and, most importantly, food. I stopped at a small stall where a woman was cooking pad thai, a famous Thai noodle dish. She smiled and asked, "Spicy or not spicy?" I hesitated. "Maybe medium spicy." She laughed. "Okay, medium spicy for you." She worked quickly, tossing noodles in a big wok with shrimp, bean sprouts, peanuts, and sauce. When she handed me the plate, the smell was incredible, a mix of garlic, lime, and something sweet. The first bite was delicious, and then the heat kicked in. My mouth felt like it was on fire, but in the best possible way. I fanned my face and said, "Wow, this is really medium spicy." The woman laughed again and handed me a glass of cold water. Phrase tip, kick in, when a feeling or effect starts to be noticeable. After eating, I walked through the rest of the market. I saw skewers of grilled squid, fried bananas, and colorful desserts made from coconut and rice. A man was selling fresh mango with sticky rice. The mango was golden and juicy, and the rice was covered in sweet coconut milk. I bought one and sat on a low plastic stool to eat it. The flavors were soft, sweet, and comforting. Around me, people were laughing, music was playing, and the warm night breeze made me feel relaxed. As I walked back to my hotel, I thought about how different Bangkok felt from Istanbul. The air, the sounds, the food, everything was new. And I knew the next few days would bring even more surprises. Chapter 5, Floating Market and Countryside Visit. The next morning, I woke up early. The hotel lobby was quiet, but outside, the streets were already alive with the sounds of motorbikes and street vendors setting up for the day. Today's plan was special. I was going to visit a floating market. A floating market is a place where sellers sit in small boats and sell goods directly from the water. I had seen pictures before, but I wanted to experience it myself. I joined a small group tour, and our guide, a friendly man named Somchai, greeted us with a big smile. "Good morning. Today we go to Daman Saduak Floating Market. Very famous in Thailand." We climbed into a minibus and began the 1-hour drive. The city's skyscrapers slowly disappeared, replaced by small houses, green fields, and canals lined with palm trees. Vocabulary tip, skyscraper, a very tall building. Canal, a man-made waterway used for boats or irrigation. When we arrived, the air was filled with the scent of grilled food and fresh fruit. We stepped into long wooden boats, each with a driver using a long paddle to push us through the water. The market was a beautiful chaos. Boats full of bananas, coconuts, pineapples, and even steaming bowls of soup floated past us. Women in wide-brimmed hats called out the prices. One boat came close, and a woman smiled at me. "Mango, very sweet," she said, holding up a golden yellow fruit. I nodded, and she expertly cut the mango into pieces before handing it to me in a small paper tray. The flavor was perfect, soft, juicy, and naturally sweet. A little further down, another boat was selling grilled skewers of chicken. The smell was irresistible, so I bought one. The marinade was a mix of garlic, soy sauce, and honey, with just a touch of chili. Phrase tip: irresistible, so good or attractive that you can't say no. Somchai, our guide, pointed to a boat selling hats. "If you buy, remember to bargain," he said with a wink. I decided to try. The seller told me 300 baht. I smiled and said 200. She shook her head, 250. We both laughed, and I agreed. It wasn't just about the price, it was about the fun of talking and connecting. After exploring for a couple of hours, Somchai told us there was one more stop, a countryside village where his cousin lived. We boarded the minibus again, and soon the busy roads turned into quiet lanes. When we arrived, the village felt like another world. Wooden houses stood on stilts above the ground. Chickens wandered freely, and children played barefoot in the yard. Somchai's cousin welcomed us with a warm smile. She led us to a shady area under a mango tree, where a table was set with dishes of rice, vegetables, and fish cooked with lemongrass. The meal was simple but full of flavor. We ate slowly, talking about life in the city versus life in the countryside. Vocabulary tip: on stilts, raised above the ground on tall posts. Lemongrass, a tropical plant used for flavoring food, especially in Southeast Asia. After lunch, we walked to a nearby rice field. The sun was warm, but a light breeze made it pleasant. The green of the rice plants stretched as far as I could see. Somchai told me, "This is my favorite place. When I am here, I feel peaceful." I understood exactly what he meant. As the day ended, we drove back to Bangkok. The city lights sparkled in the distance, but part of me still felt like I was back in that quiet village. Chapter 6: Kyoto Arrival and Ryokan Stay. After a few days in Thailand, it was time for my next destination, Japan. I took an overnight flight from Bangkok to Osaka, and from there, a train to Kyoto. The moment I stepped onto the platform at Kyoto Station, I felt a change in atmosphere. The air was crisp and cool, with the faint smell of roasted chestnuts from a nearby shop. Everything around me felt calm, clean, and perfectly organized. Kyoto is famous for its temples, gardens, and traditional houses. But I wasn't just here to see tourist spots. I had booked to stay at a ryokan, a traditional Japanese inn. Vocabulary tip: crisp air, fresh and cool air, often used to describe pleasant weather. In a small hotel, often family-run. The ryokan was tucked away in a quiet street lined with wooden buildings. A gentle rain had just started, making the wooden walls glisten. When I slid open the paper door, a woman in a kimono bowed deeply and said, "Irashimasu, welcome." She led me to my room, which had tatami mats on the floor, a low table, and sliding shoji doors. There was no bed. Instead, a futon would be laid out for me at night. Everything smelled faintly of straw from the tatami. That evening, the hostess served me a kaiseki dinner, a traditional multi-course Japanese meal. The dishes were like works of art: tiny bowls of sashimi, grilled fish with a sprig of pine, soup with tofu and mushrooms, and pickled vegetables in delicate colors. I tried each bite slowly, appreciating the balance of flavors: salty, sweet, sour, and umami. Even the way the plates were arranged felt like part of the experience. Phrase tip: part of the experience, something that adds to the overall enjoyment or meaning of an activity. After dinner, I decided to take a short walk. The streets were quiet, with only the sound of rain dripping from the roofs. I passed a small shrine, lit by a single lantern. The soft glow reflected on the wet stone path, and I felt like I had stepped into another time. When I returned to the ryokan, the futon was already laid out. I slipped under the soft, warm covers, listening to the rain outside. It was one of the most peaceful nights I had ever experienced. The next morning, the hostess served a traditional Japanese breakfast: grilled salmon, rice, miso soup, and green tea. It was different from what I usually ate in the morning, but it felt healthy and refreshing. After breakfast, I planned my day, visiting temples, walking through bamboo forests, and maybe even wearing a kimono for a few photos. Kyoto had so much to offer, and I knew one thing for sure: I would need more than a few days to truly see it all. Chapter 7: Arashiyama Bamboo Forest and Tea Ceremony. On my second day in Kyoto, I took a bus to Arashiyama, a district famous for its bamboo forest and beautiful temples. The air was fresh and cool, with birds singing in the trees. Walking through the bamboo grove felt magical. Tall, green bamboo stalks stretched high into the sky, swaying gently in the breeze. The sound was peaceful, like nature's own music. As I walked, I met a Japanese woman wearing a kimono. She smiled and said, "Konnichiwa. Would you like to join our tea ceremony today?" I was surprised but happy. "Yes, please. I've always wanted to experience a real Japanese tea ceremony." She explained that the tea ceremony, called Chano-yu, was a traditional ritual focused on making and drinking matcha, powdered green tea. It was about mindfulness, respect, and enjoying the moment. Vocabulary tip: ritual, a set of actions done in a specific order, often for cultural or religious reasons. Mindfulness, being fully present and aware of the moment. We walked together to a small tea house near a quiet garden. Inside, a tea master dressed in simple robes showed us how to prepare matcha. He carefully measured the powdered tea, whisked it with hot water, and served it in a small bowl. We sat quietly, sipping the thick, slightly bitter tea. The experience was calming and respectful, with every movement having meaning. After the ceremony, I thanked the woman for inviting me and continued exploring Arashiyama. I visited the Tenryuji Temple, famous for its beautiful gardens. The colors of the leaves, the reflections in the water, and the sound of flowing streams created a perfect harmony. That evening, I returned to Kyoto city center, feeling grateful for the day's peaceful moments. Kyoto was teaching me that travel is not just about seeing new places, it's about feeling, understanding, and connecting. Chapter 8: Barcelona, Beach, Tapas and Meeting Travelers. After many wonderful days in Asia, my journey took me to Europe, to the vibrant city of Barcelona, Spain. From the moment I landed, the city felt full of life and color. The sun was shining brightly, and the warm Mediterranean breeze greeted me like an old friend. My hotel was near the beach, and after checking in, I decided to take a walk along the famous Barceloneta promenade. People were sunbathing, playing volleyball, and riding bikes. The sea sparkled in the sunlight, and the smell of salty air mixed with fresh seafood from nearby restaurants. I stopped at a small tapas bar. Tapas are small plates of food, perfect for sharing and trying many flavors. The waiter smiled and said, "Hola, what can I get you?" I asked for a plate of patatas bravas, fried potatoes with spicy sauce, and a glass of sangria, a fruity red wine drink. While waiting, I struck up a conversation with a couple sitting next to me. They were from Madrid but visiting Barcelona for the weekend. We talked about favorite Spanish dishes, music, and travel tips. Vocabulary tip: tapas, small dishes often shared in Spanish meals. Spicy, having a strong, hot flavor, usually from chili peppers. After the tapas, I wandered through the narrow streets of the Gothic Quarter. The architecture was a mix of old and new. Ancient stone buildings stood next to modern cafes. Street musicians played guitars and violins, adding a lively soundtrack to the evening. I met a group of travelers from different countries who invited me to join them for a walk to the famous Sagrada Familia Church. It was still under construction, but its tall spires and intricate details were breathtaking. We talked about our travel experiences and shared stories late into the night. I realized that travel is not just about places, it's about people. Meeting new friends, learning about different cultures, and sharing moments creates memories that last forever. As the night grew late, I walked back to my hotel along the beach. The waves gently crashed on the shore, and the city lights reflected in the water. I felt tired but happy, ready for the next day's adventure. Chapter 9: Closing Reflections and English Learning Tips. After traveling through so many amazing places, Istanbul, Bangkok, Kyoto, and Barcelona, it was time to reflect on my journey. Travel is much more than seeing famous sights. It's about experiencing new cultures, tasting new foods, meeting people, and sometimes getting lost. Getting lost can be scary, but it's also an opportunity to discover hidden places and learn more about yourself. English learning tip: when you listen to stories like this, try to listen actively. Don't just hear the words, but think about their meaning. Write down new words or phrases and try to use them in your own sentences. Practice speaking aloud to improve your pronunciation and confidence. Remember, language learning is a journey, just like traveling. It takes time, patience, and curiosity. Thank you so much for joining me on this trip. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And remember, the world is full of stories waiting for you to discover. See you next time on Loop the Loop English.